I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with everybody today. I think this is a great venue, a great outreach. I want to particularly thank Philip and Kara and Daniel with Forest Service for putting this thing together. I think this is a really good means for information sharing, and if you take nothing else away from my talk, I think it's a two-way thing. You know, maybe we have some technical information or guidance that might be of assistance to you, but you folks know your properties better than we do. You know the history of your property, you know what management things you'd like to accomplish. So if there's opportunities for any of our agencies to partner with you, to provide you some assistance, be it financial or technical guidance, that's what we're here for to talk about today. So if I don't get a chance to meet you, please come interrupt me, or I'm not going to starve to death. So, interrupt me during lunch and introduce yourself, and I'll try to get around as much as I can to everybody. But I mean, we're here today to share information, I hope. I'll give you a little bit of just background. I work for the Ecological Services field office located in Clear Lake. It's basically the south side of Houston. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm in one of 4 Ecological Services offices in the state of Texas. So there's the office I work in Houston. We have another office in Austin. There's one in Arlington, and then there's one down on the lower coast in Corpus Christi. So just to kind of give you an idea or introduce you to the service for those of you who don't know our organization very well, that's kind of where I come from and where we're located in the state. We are, again, I heard somebody say it earlier, we're a resource for you. We're funded by taxpayer dollars, so, please call upon us. We are here for you. That's where to locate us, or where to locate me. Like I said, come, tap me on the shoulder, tackle me, whatever you have to do. I'm happy to provide whatever information I can today in terms of how to contact us, what questions we can maybe help you with, what questions, we can direct you to others to help you with. We're here to hopefully work with you and provide some assistance. This is the service's mission, is to work with others for the protection and enhancement of fish and wildlife species, their habitats, and for the continuing use and benefit of the American people. I wanted to give a little bit of just kind of a regulatory background here, and I'll try not to be long-winded because it's not lost upon me that I'm what stands between you and lunch. So just to give you a little bit of a background or a primer on the ESA. This is one of the principal authorities that the Fish and Wildlife Service works under. The ESA was established in the early 70s, again, for the protection and recovery of imperiled species. There are 2 principal federal agencies tasked with implementation or the oversight, I guess, of the ESA, and that's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service. The difference being basically a geographic divide between the areas that we cover. The service is responsible for the terrestrial and freshwater fish and wildlife species. Paul covered this a little bit just a few minutes ago. Why are endangered species important? Again, the benefits of natural diversity. I'll give you a local example, and actually we have at the end of this table right here a few, I'm going to call them out, some of the biologists from the Atwater Prairie Chicken Refuge right down the road. And one of the things they're working on or have been working on, some really cool stuff, is, again, it's another local endangered species, the Atwater Prairie Chicken. And what they found is that through the introduction of, many years ago, decades ago, the introduction of red imported fire ants, nasty fire ants, those animals have limited the fledgling survival rate of the prairie chicken out on the refuge, or actually across the range, not just at Atwaters, but Texas City and elsewhere where they're still located. And it's not a direct predation thing. What they found is that the fire ants alter the arthropod community, which is what those little fledglings feed upon when they're first hatched. So it's pretty cool stuff, and this may have some merit with regard to Houston toad as well. But so just to kind of give you a local example of why biodiversity is important, and also demonstrating why things like introduced species like the fire ants are so destructive potentially in the environment. Another reason for protecting perhaps endangered species, I'll give you an example, or maybe you've heard of the Pacific yew tree, and there was a chemical compound called Taxol that was isolated from that tree, and it's had benefits as a curative for a number of types of cancer. There's been other compounds isolated from vegetation that are now being used. For example, there's one that's being used for as a treatment for childhood leukemia. So just to kind of give you, or to bring home to you why these species are important and why we should perhaps seek to recover them, to hang on to them, aside from, that's a very kind of human-centric way of looking at things, but I guess my point to you is there are benefits to having these species around, to keeping them around. Paul mentioned, again, the environmental, or the endangered species as environmental monitors, and again, from an economic perspective, their uses potentially as biological controls for things we don't want. Again, other types of insects and stuff, agricultural uses for such things. Talking about extinction for a moment. Extinction is a natural phenomenon. So, kind of a background level, several thousand years ago, at the end of the last ice age, what we've established, or what we believe to be the case, is the extinction level is probably on the order of about 3, just for North America, the extinction level is probably on the order of 3 species per every 100 years. So since settlement, in other words, last several hundred years here in North America, we've seen an extinction of approximately 500 animals. So many, many times that. So you ask the question, and we can't, I don't think, definitively say that it's causative from people being here, but there's an awful lot, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's certainly a correlation between human settlement of North America and increase in extinction rate. So, and why am I telling you this? I guess it's just kind of general knowledge, or maybe to help provide an understanding of why the service is working towards recovery of some of these species. And what do I mean when I say recovery? Kind of defined here is that the point is to restore species to a point to where they are sustainable, either across their range or at least within viable subpopulations. That's what we're aiming towards with the Houston toad, to give you an example. The goal is to have 3 geographically separate populations. Bastrop was one of those. Bastrop took a really severe hit here last fall. Austin, Colorado County probably constitute, just based on where the habitat remains, probably constitutes another one of those populations that we would look to try to preserve, supplement, if we can at some point, working with private landowners. And I guess the other thing is do we have a plan for this? Yes, there is a recovery plan. A recovery plan for the Houston toad, to give you an example, was done in 1984. There's currently being a revision made to that plan as we speak, and there's a draft document that's making its way through the service right now. Give you a little more history on the Houston toad in particular, because that's what I get, or have the privilege of doing. I have a pretty cool job, actually. I get to work towards the recovery of an endangered species, and I get to talk to and ask silly questions of really smart folks like Paul and our university and academic partners. So the toad was first discovered by a gentleman who's an amateur herpetologist by the name of John Watring back in the late 40s in Harris County. It was amongst the first amphibians to be listed on the endangered species list back in the early 70s. And again, as Paul mentioned, its habitat, as we understand it right now, is healthy and mature pine and oak systems in deep sandy soils. And again, Paul pointed this out. It's the only toad that exists entirely within the state of Texas. Again, this is similar to the slide that Paul showed you. The only difference here being it just shows you, again, they were rediscovered or discovered or documented in Lavaca and Burleson counties with the occurrence of a single toad last year. So the drought was particularly tough on them and in terms of finding them as well through Paul and academics' survey efforts. But they're hanging on. Here's the slide he mentioned, so to give you an idea of what the numbers are. These are the documented numbers of individuals over the last 3 years. I can tell you that from the early indications this year, we've already got better numbers of animals identified on the landscape this year than last year. I think that's directly attributable to the good rain we've had this spring. So you see there, 2009, we found approximately 36 individuals. And this is, again, like Paul mentioned, from chorusing individuals. 29, so you kind of get the idea of the trend here. And if you extend this back in time, we have data from it, for example, from Bastrop County for, many more years than this, but the overall trend is down. Bouncing around here a little bit, just to give you kind of an idea of the types of threats that not just the Houston toad, but endangered species or habitat more generally is in threat of or imperiled by. These are some of the kinds of things that our office deals with examining or evaluating the effects of and trying to work with either federal agencies, federal permittees, private landowners who are just doing projects. But these are the types of issues that we deal with. And these are also, all of these actually would also directly or have directly impacted Houston toad specifically. So what are we doing? I want to talk to you a little bit here about what the service is doing, what our ongoing efforts are and have been with regard to recovery of the toad. We just completed last year a 5-year review, essentially just a document that spells out what our plan is, where we're going, what we've done, what we think we can do. There is a recovery team and habitat delivery team. These are kind of reconvened or reestablished within the last few years here, as Paul mentioned, as there's been a push to reinvigorate the program with regard to the recovery of the Houston toad. Things like what we're doing here today, outreach, which hopefully leads to an increased interaction between your federal and state agencies and you private landowners to affect habitat restoration for the benefit, again, not just of the Houston toad, but of wildlife and fish and wildlife species in general. We're working towards a safe harbor program. That's a document and a voluntary agreement. I'll talk about it a little more here in a minute. Our head starting program, captive propagation, which is actually actively being worked on right now by Houston Zoo, and then also the research and monitoring stuff that Paul mentioned as well. Those are things that are done in concert with our partners at the zoo and at Texas State and other academic institutions. Just kind of in general, some of the other things that my office, folks in my office work on. Section 7 consultations is a major thing that we do. That's Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. And these are largely won't have impact on individual landowners. These are for actions that are undertaken agency to agency. So if the Corps of Engineers wants to build a project, they would engage in the Section 7 consultation with our office. So I guess I point that out just because to make the point that there are various sections of the ESA. Not all of them are applicable to each and every entity. So interesting maybe point, all other federal agencies are tasked with or must utilize their resources for the furtherance of threatened and endangered species as well. I mean, that's part of what the Act says or requires of each and every federal agency and each and every federal action undertaken. Habitat conservation plans and incidental take permits. A lot of this is regulatory related, not meant to put anybody at unease. These are regulatory mechanisms that are in place for the service to be able to try to regulate and mitigate take of endangered species. So there is a process. If you have an endangered species, if another federal agency is going to impact an endangered or threatened species, I guess it's just to let you know that there is a process in place to permit and authorize potentially the take of those animals where it's found to be necessary and where those impacts can be mitigated. Please don't take from my discussion here with you today that Jeff said you had to go get an incidental take permit for any action that you undertake on your property. That's not what we're here for. That's not my message to you. It's that, you know, threatened and endangered species are by definition, they're rare. So the potential that any of you ever have to deal with any of this stuff is probably pretty remote. I just put it out there for informational purposes. And there are folks that will go through these processes in order to cover themselves from a legal perspective for perfectly lawful activities. Just covers you for potentially for the take of individual animals. Again, I mentioned safe harbor agreements a minute ago. Safe harbor agreements are voluntary agreements between the service and non-federal entities, and they are, again, for getting to recovery goals. In other words, recovering species, hopefully to get them, with the goal being to get them off of an endangered species list or to downlist them from endangered to threatened or from threatened off of the list. And it's to give landowners assurances that when they're undertaking activities that are, if they're managing for the Houston toad, for example, that you're not going to, you know, be subject to any additional regulatory burden. Kind of what I just talked about there gives us an opportunity to work with you, and it gives you assurances that when you're working and engaged with the service and working towards the recovery of an endangered species, you know, we're not going to come knocking on the door and you know, telling you what you can and can't do on your property. That's not what we're here for. It's not what we're about. We are currently working on a programmatic and range-wide safe harbor agreement that would cover all 9 of those counties you saw in the earlier slide. It's in the works. We've had a couple of speed bumps along the way. We hope to roll that out maybe sometime later this year, maybe this time next year. We'll have that in place as another tool for us to work with you, a tool for you to have some assurance that, you know, you're working with the big bad federal government, that we're not, that our intentions are good, and that we're all working towards the same goal. Some of the avenues we have to work with individual landowners and provide, again, not just technical, but sometimes financial assistance is through our Partners for Fish and Wildlife program. One of our partners biologists, I'll point him out back there in the back, Chris Harper. Chris is officed in our Austin office, and he's here today just to also provide information. He works not just in the Austin area, but even down into our Clear Lake office area. So those guys are there, and he can tell you about the Partners program and what the service might be able to help you do in terms of, again, cost sharing or technical information. Some of the next things we're working on towards recovery of the Houston toad is, again, like I said, completion of that programmatic safe harbor agreement. We're updating the recovery plan, including a genetics plan and a captive propagation plan that go into that. Continuing things like this, landowner outreach, trying to engage landowners, form partnerships where those things make sense to you and us for the benefit of the species. And the partners projects, right in line with that. Just a picture of a pond. I think this is from Bastrop, one of the breeding ponds at Bastrop. Just give you an idea again of what the habitat looks like. This is Lost Pines area. This is a similar picture to one of them Paul had. This is a pond right here in Austin County where breeding was documented a couple years ago. This thing pretty much dried out entirely last year. And just thank you to our partners, the Forest Service, Texas State University, Houston Zoo. Certainly none of this stuff would be possible without the cooperation of all of these entities that we see here. And going forward, I guess my last note to you or message to you is that we will not be able to affect this kind of, or these recovery actions without the assistance and the cooperation and partnering with private landowners in Austin, in Colorado County, and range-wide. Just a few of the folks here that help me put together a presentation or providing information for our presentation here.